Let's talk about Ava DuVernay's Origin. Origin is it's basically a biographical drama about a real writer. Her name is Isabel Wilkerson, and she wrote a book which became a New York Times bestseller called Caste: The Origins of Our Discontents. Ava DuVernay, of course, she directed the film Selma, which I thought was very good, not like spectacular, but I thought it was a very good film. She was nominated for an Oscar for her documentary called The 13th, about the 13th Amendment, which is also it's on Netflix. I think it's a fantastic documentary. And Origin explores the issue of race, not just in America, but around the world. We meet Isabel. She has written one book and she's giving a lecture. We meet her mother, who is she's in her waning years, having health issues. We also meet her boyfriend, Brett, played by John Bernthal, and Isabel Wilkerson is played by Anjanou Ellis Taylor. And I'm sure I may have pronounced that incorrectly, and my apologies. And it basically follows the author as she is writing this book, and she wants to write a book about race because it's sort of kicked off by the Trayvon Martin's tragic murder.
Death.
And so that's kind of where the movie begins. And then she wants to explore the question. I mean, everything isn't racist, right? When you look at the world, you see this is racist and this is racist and this is racist. She's asking this question. Not everything's racist. Okay. I really want to explore where this idea comes from. And she begins to, in a very thoughtful way, explore the issue of race and how prejudice becomes seeded in a culture. And it takes her all the way to the Deep South and into Germany, where she looks at like, well, how did Jews become this lower class? And then how did the Holocaust even happen? What were the origins of it? And she wants to look at this in a thoughtful way and not a reactionary way, because she's tasked by her manager. She's given a task to write something about Trayvon Martin. She doesn't want to write it. It's like, everything's not racist. Things just happen. And then she begins to actually explore the idea. In the midst of this, her boyfriend dies tragically and her mother also passes away. She loses so many people close to her, and it kind of sets her on a spiral of just pouring herself into work as a distraction away from the personal tragedy that she's suffering. So she actually goes to Germany. She goes and explores these topics, and really comes down to looking at the caste system in India, and looking at how people are kind of convinced in a psychological way to, like, well, you're less than, right? And then it becomes seated in the culture. This is what the film explores. This is a very rough film to watch. And I want to give kudos to Ava DuVernay as a director. She shot this film, is very low budget, and she shot it on film. Okay. She shot this movie on 35 millimeter film. I watched the credits. It's in there in the credits. And I admire that. It's also, the film it is sort of biographical drama, but it also is something of this exploration, but it's also simultaneously partly feels like a documentary, because you'll see when she goes to Germany, she's reading books that are very rare. So she has to go to a library and, there's one copy of this book she's going through. So it's almost this, you're seeing sort of almost documentary film styles. It's also kind of surrealistic, where she sees herself in the stories that she's exploring. And one of the most brutal stories, and when I say brutal, you see images from the Holocaust. You see images of slaves on slave ships. You see horrific images from history of people that have been oppressed. And one of the most horrific stories is a little boy, like an 8, 9-year-old kid. He's a little black child in the South. And this is when they had whites only pools, like only whites could go. They have the whites go in these pools, the blacks go in these pools. And these kids had just finished playing a baseball game. It was a hot summer day. And these young boys, and they're all white kids, and there was one black kid, and the one black kid was not allowed in the pool. Now you think, well, this is like, oh, this is, but you see it from the kid's point of view, and it's horrifying. And all the little white kids are like, why can't our friend come in the pool with us? We're just hanging out. We're having a fun day. We just played baseball. Let's go in the pool. It's, I don't want to detail what happens in that scene, but this boy is not allowed in the pool, and it's a horrific moment to witness, because you can tell that the kids are traumatized by this. They're traumatized by witnessing this thing. Here's what I want to say about this film. I think it's a phenomenal film. An exploration of race and caste systems that have been put into place throughout civilization. And it feels, sometimes the movie does feel like a lecture. It feels like this is a lecture from academia. And I think the intended audience that would benefit from seeing this will never go see this movie. So, and I could compare it to a film we reviewed a couple years ago, and I had the same comment. The movie She Said, which is about the beginnings of the Me Too movement, and the article in the New York Times that began the takedown of Harvey Weinstein and sort of kicked off the Me Too movement, was this series of stories in the New York Times. And I thought, well, this is a really phenomenal film. No one's going to see this movie. Unfortunately, I feel the same way about this film. I feel it's a very thoughtful exploration of race. But here's the thing. People who are actually racist in the real world don't go to see these movies. So what this movie is doing is preaching to people who already get this message. And in some parts of the film, I'll just say this, very hard to watch. Another movie this year that I saw that was also very hard to watch is Zone of Interest. Zone of Interest. I will never go see that movie again. It's brutal. And I almost feel the same way about this film. At a certain point, it becomes oppression porn, right? Like, I almost feel, and also I get this movie. Was this movie made to change hearts and minds? Because I don't think this movie will do that. I think this movie will preach to progressives who will be praising it up and down. And there'll be a lot of people, not me, but some other people that will be afraid to criticize this film. So here's my critique of it. I think this film was really made to win Oscars. But if you really, really want to get to people on a mainstream level and have them rethink issues regarding race, you need to make an update of something like a Blazing Saddles. I feel that a more mainstream comedy would make concepts and ideas more palatable and more mainstream, so that we can laugh together. There's nothing funny in this movie, by the way, nothing funny whatsoever. But I'm saying, if you are committed to the message of this film and you want to see these ideas take root, you are only preaching to people who agree with this. If you could somehow make a modern update of a Blazing Saddles, more people will see that film. And so while and by the way, I think Ava DuVernay is wildly talented director. I mean, she had she was criticized for that Wrinkle in Time movie, which I just think is just not, it's a Disney movie. Yeah. I think you were doomed. Whoever made that movie was
under the thumb of Disney.
She was under the thumb of Disney, whatever. Here she makes an independent film where she gets to do whatever the hell she wants. And I think she knocked it out of the park. I also think that if she's committed to the messages in the film, that I think a more palatable version would be a laugh out loud comedy, because this movie, after the after George Floyd and the racial reckoning in America, I don't think people are going to go see this film, just like nobody went to see She Said.
Because you're
So
saying
while
basically we're biased against it all from the start.
exactly. So I'm talking about the audience,
about.
and I'm not saying that anyone who doesn't see this movie or doesn't like it, I'm not saying they're racist at all. I think that's stupid. I hate that stuff. Okay. I'm saying they're tired of it. And I think the fact that we're seeing like this, the actual effects of DEI in America and how that's like upended workplaces. This is not a movie that I think is going to be widely accepted. It may even be completely ignored by the Oscars. I could be proven wrong. It could get this movie could get a Best Picture nomination, but
in January. It came out in January.
Well, I mean, it in wide release. Now it's in wide release. Okay. This movie is now in wide release. So while I think that Ava DuVernay made a fantastic film, I just think it's not going to resonate. The whole thing is like,
it's not a moneymaker. That's what you're saying.
It's not a moneymaker, not going to and it wasn't made for a lot of money. So I mean, you can tell it was low budget, and I mean this as a positive. It's so, and I always would encourage that anyways. Like, I think it's more authentic if you go that route, but it comes off to me as oppression porn, and you're not going to convince. I mean, look, there have been so many movies made about race, and I can confidently say that not a single racist person saw a movie and said, I'm going to stop being racist today. That's stupid. Okay. That's ridiculous. What this movie does is it's presenting this argument. It made me actually very interested in the book.
Yeah. Let me,
but I would look, so my feeling about this film is, like Zone of Interest, this is a rough movie to watch. And the scene I'm describing with the boy at the pool with his baseball team is just heartbreaking. And I'll connect it to a story that happened to me in real life. Okay. My grandmother lived in Flint, Michigan, and I would visit my grandmother on weekends. Love my Nana. This is my father's mother, my Nana, Leona Gore. Okay. So we would go visit my Nana, loved her, and she lived in Flint. Now, if you know anything about Flint, it's not very diverse, Well, I'll just say this. She lived in a neighborhood where I think she was the only white person in the neighborhood, and whatever, right? Visit my grandma. We had so much fun. We go shopping. We do fun things, whatever. Nana, you're getting, grandparents tend to love bomb kids, and I got a lot of love from my grandparents. One day I'm out with my cousins, Kyle and Craig, and we're hanging out in the front yard, and a gang of black kids came and beat the shit out of us. I was 5 years old. I have a vivid memory of this. Beat the crap out of the three of us, and it was like 10 against 3. So got the crap beat out of us. I was pushed to the ground. I was kicked. My Nana brought us in and sat the three of us down. And I thought it was very smart of her to do this. She went to each of us and she says, I want you to name an important black person from history, someone that you know, someone that you admire. And I loved the Jackson 5. I said, Michael Jackson. Okay. My cousin says Martin Luther King. And we had a whole conversation about great black Americans. She knew that this traumatic event could have instilled some racism in us or prejudice. And she wanted to end that by having a whole conversation about all the good black people that she knew, because she knew her neighbors and she knew everyone in that neighborhood. And I'll never forget that. So that was an early experience of mine. And there you are. So I don't think that children are inherently born racist. It's a learned thing. It's just learned. And I do like that this film explores everything isn't racist. It's just not. There's something else here. There's another layer to that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is it's not racism is not black and white. It's everywhere. I mean, everyone who lives in a tribe of some kind has something against the other tribe, and whether it be cultural, whether it be skin color, whether it be national borders, we're kind of programmed that way to find safety with those who are like us and distrust those who are not. And the part of humanity is about overcoming those mistrusts and overcoming those borders. I mean, from what you're telling me, I'm going to see this movie now.
Yeah. I wanted to have a discussion about it with you. We just the timing didn't work, but like it's.
Quite frankly, I didn't want to see this movie.
Oh, really?
It was exactly what I think everyone thinks about this movie. That it is a lecture about how bad white people are.
It's a lecture, but it's not. It's a little more nuanced than white people bad. It's more nuanced than that. Yeah. But there's a lot of bad white people in this movie, and there are also good white people, like John Bernthal's character. Like you meet this couple that are an author. It's a flashback, but you meet so there is a balance. Yeah. I'm just saying that because of the like you said, sorry, Al, you said you didn't want to see this movie, and I'm telling you, most people are probably not going to see it. And then they did this thing where they do this little mini interview with Ava DuVernay. And I actually didn't like the interview. I've seen her speak before. She's a very inspiring speaker, but in this conversation, she just talks about like the casting and stuff. And I'm like, get into the ideas. She doesn't talk about the ideas in the film. She talks about making the film. That's fine. I want to hear about the ideas. Yeah. She didn't really talk about it. And she does a thing that's right out of Sound of Freedom. So she does this little, like, she does this interview. It's at the very end of the film after the credits. And then she asks people to go to a website and give money so other people can go see the movie, which is exactly what Sound of Freedom did.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, like I said, I don't mind a movie that brings up ideas I don't necessarily agree with. What I want to see in those movies, and I'm not saying I don't disagree with this movie. I'm just saying, you know, if I'm going in knowing that I might have my beliefs challenged, I at least want it done in a thoughtful way, one that makes an attempt to put themselves in my shoes for a moment and then present their side of it and then know where I'm coming from and not make assumptions about me that aren't true. And that's the sense that I'm getting from your description of this, is that it is going to it's going to make you think. It's going to make you challenge your beliefs, but it does it in a sensitive and somewhat intelligent way, an emotional way that I'm interested in seeing it. You know, but I get why people don't want to see it. I mean, I obviously do. The way it was marketed, the way it was described, this movie is being promoted. I didn't want to see it. The other thing is that every movie like this leading up to this movie has been lectures, has been, let me tell you why you're a bad person. Why would I pay money to go see a movie that tells me that I'm a bad person? I want to see a movie. If you think I'm a bad person and you want me to see your movie, prove to me that you understand my viewpoint, where I'm coming from. And if you could do that, I will go see your movie. And it sounds like that's this movie.
If I told you that this was the best film that explores race, would you even want to see it?
I would. You know I mean, it was good and it was fair. It was good and it was fair. I will see it.
I think that you could look at this film and say, I don't think this is fair. Mm-hmm. There's a scene with Nick Offerman. I'm not going to ruin it. But
does he play a racist?
Well, he's wearing a MAGA hat. Okay. And I just sort of rolled my eyes. I'm like, why are we doing this?
Oh, you just ruined the movie.
But then he has a very then he has a very thoughtful conversation. Mm-hmm. You know, he's just a guy that comes to her house to do some work on her house, and they get into a chat. Like she's trying to figure it out herself. Yeah. So we're kind of on her journey, and she's basically saying not everything in the world is racist. That's like a knee-jerk, dumb reaction to things. But where does it come from? And it's an exploration of I don't want to simplify it, but she really looks at the caste system in India, and there are certain castes. We did an article in Film Threat in the 90s called the Hollywood caste system, where we ranked like where people stood on the ladder in Hollywood, with interns and PAs at the bottom, and then executives at the top, and celebrities. And we kind of like, this is how Hollywood works. And the story was inspired by the fact that, like, I would go to this restaurant that was right across from where we worked, and I would get seated based on what they perceived my status to be in Hollywood.
Well,
and I'm just like an editor of a movie magazine, Film Threat, right? We went across the street, went to this restaurant. The restaurant was Kate Manalini's. No one remembers that restaurant but me. Anyways, really great fun. I like that restaurant. They had great sourdough bread. Anyway, so I go to this restaurant.
I think the idea of the caste system is correct, and as to why we treat other people who are not like us differently. And by not like us, I'm talking politics, I'm talking race, I'm talking culture, I'm talking gender.
Right.
And it's because we put ourselves in this caste system where we are angry at the people above us, and we look down and treat miserably the people who are below us. And wherever you fall along that it will decide how you treat, how you're perceived on that level, and how you treat people above and below you, or how you consider people who are above and below you. And I think there's a lot of truth to that idea of the caste system as the root to a lot of the racial problems we have in the world today.
Yeah. In any case, I'm curious to see how this film does. I'm curious.
It won't do well.
The way it's being marketed.
If it's as cheap as you say it is, it'll probably make money.
But I'll say, I think the movie in the end will end up making money because it was made inexpensively. And I think that added to the authenticity and the style of film. That was a positive, that it was made inexpensively. So that's smart. I think that's very smart, right? It's not like making a movie like Bros for $50 million and then wondering how come it didn't do well at the box office. This movie was made inexpensively. It will make its money back. I'm confident of that. But will it be a huge hit? I honestly do not think so. And I don't think it will have the intention of this film is to spread the ideas in the film. But I think that's the intention. I don't think it's going to achieve that. It was made to win awards, and on that, it's possible that it will succeed.
Yeah.
Let's go to your.
I'll just say because it came out in January, I don't think it's going to win any awards.
Shall see.
That's why you say for January instead of it should have been out later in the year.
Here's what I'll say: is I had a thought, and I'm
Well, I mean, I'll say there's a war currently being waged right now about religion and about culture. And
I'll just say this.
Say that this idea happened a long time ago. It still happens today.
Here's a point. Here's a point I really wish I had made in the review. I'm sorry I forgot this. I actually took notes of what I wanted to talk about. I forgot one major point I wanted to make. We spend so much time talking about racism and talking about the past that we do not spend enough time patting ourselves on the back about how great things are now as compared to the past. Do you know how many millionaires are in America who happen to be Black? A lot. When you look in the arenas of entertainment, there have been more opportunities giving to Black Americans, and no one is stopping anyone from being successful in that arena. If we spent as much time talking about how far we've come and how good things are now as compared to the past, rather than constantly looking at the past and look how bad things are, look how bad things are. I get it. It's much better now. And why don't we celebrate that? Why don't we celebrate that? We need to celebrate that rather than constantly looking at, yes, there were racist people in the 50s and there were certain pools that people didn't go to because of their skin color. Well, guess what? We solved racism because look at college today with separate graduation ceremonies. That stuff needs to be called out. It's disgusting. It's disgusting that we're sliding back into our racist
60s
past.
Segregation.
60s segregation. It's back, baby. But it's in 2020s. morons in academia that are running things. Patrick
I'll
Lemire.
say, I mean,
Sorry.
quite frankly, I wish when I graduated from college that I graduated today than I did in the mid 80s, or I'm sorry, the late 80s. Because the opportunities for me when I graduated from college were much smaller to do what I wanted to do, to even do this. My ability to do this was not there compared to if I had done it. If I graduated from college 5 years ago, I think my paths, the choice of my paths would have been much different than it was in the 90s.